Good day, everyone. Welcome to the International Conference on Consciousness-Based Leadership and Management, hosted by Maharishi, organized by Maharishi International University, co-sponsored by MSR Group of Academy of Management. We are on day 2, Saturday, May 22nd, and this is session number 7. It's a panel discussion on developing consciousness-based leadership and happiness through the development of path for sustainability mindset. We have a very distinguished panel of 7 academics or some practitioners, and we have a moderator, Dr. Charlie Yang. At this point, let me hand over to our session moderator, Dr. Charlie Yang. Charlie, all yours, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Anil. I first share our screen first. Can you see the slides? Perfect. Thank you, everybody. I'm Charlie Yang from Southern Connecticut State University, and I'm really excited to join these 7 wonderful panelists as a moderator. And first, I'd like to share with you the basic format of this 75-minute panel discussion. Each presenter will have 4 minutes to deliver his or her brief individual talk, followed by a 30-minute in-depth group discussion. The group discussion will be focused on the 2 key topics of our panel discussion, which are conscious-based leadership and happiness, flourishing. Then we will open the floor to questions from the audience using the chat feature. So when I ring the bell, that basically means each panelist will have 30 seconds to wrap up his or her talk. So now let me first like to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Isabel Rimannoxi, and I assume that we all know who she is, the convener of LEAP, the Prime Working Group on the Sustainability Mindset. Actually, she is the one who introduced me the concept of the sustainability mindset when we first met at the Academy of Management conference in 2016. So I will give the floor to Isabel.
Thank you very much, Charlie. It's a pleasure to be here. So if you can move one slide, what I want to talk is about steps and footholds to climb a mountain, the mountain of sustainability mindset. We go to the previous one. I want just to share for a moment the enormous mountain that stood before us. If you go one before this, okay. Thank you. And the reason that I wanted to share that that image was that when I was doing my research, I had a conversation with the late Ray Anderson, and he thought he needed an image to bring his leaders and his employees onto this initiative. And he said, this will be like climbing Mount Sustainability. And it is really, when we are talking about developing a mindset, we don't know what will be the angle, what will be the weather, what will be the terrain. So that is why I like this image. You can move one ahead. However, I was also thinking that the mountain upside down is really what is the mindset, because it is the non-visible part of an iceberg. It is what is under the surface, not the visible part of the sustainability actions, but what is under the surface. And if you click along, thank you very much. That was the core of my curiosity. I wanted to understand why certain leaders engage in sustainability initiatives, particularly what they knew to do so, what were their motivations, trying to see if there is something that we can intentionally develop. Click along, thank you very much. And the motivation is there in the heart, and click along. Thank you very much. And so I came up with a number of content areas and elements that actually can be developed. And these 4 content areas, one is called ecological worldview, the other is called systems perspective, the third is the content area of emotional intelligence, particularly certain aspects of it. And the fourth area is spiritual intelligence. And if you click one more, thank you. So within each of these four content areas is where these different elements fell. And I will quickly introduce that there are 12 principles. One is ecoliteracy, but it's not just about what we know, but how we feel, engaging the emotions, connecting emotions with the data, which is something that is very rare. And we get more engaged when we can have an emotional connection with the data. The second within ecological worldview is, what is my contribution? How am I part of the problem? Very important to link information out there to what does that mean for me? Am I part of the problem? Very important step. The next four fall within systems perspective, how we can incorporate long-term thinking to the very pervasive short-term thinking that we are used to. How can we complement our linear thinking with flowing in cycles? How can we learn and develop both and thinking to bridge the dualistic thinking that is so common in our way to analyze information? And finally, interconnectedness. Then we have these three blue falling into the content area of emotional intelligence. How can we become more own our own in creativity? Because many times we have self-limiting thoughts and we have to reinvent everything. Reflection is about learning to pause, like we did here in the beginning, noticing our pace so that we can reflect on what is happening. And self-awareness, getting in touch with what are the anchors of our identity. And the last three within the area of spiritual intelligence, what is our purpose? Spend some time thinking, why are we doing what we are doing at the end of the day? Having experience of oneness with nature and practice as well as achieving results of mindfulness. These were three powerful levers for change within the area of spiritual intelligence. So if you move one more slide, please.
Isabel, I'm sorry, but your time is used up. So you can actually talk more about it when we engage in group discussion, because we have 6 other panelists.
Okay, I never heard your ding.
Oh, I will then push it harder for other panelists.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, then our next presenter is Dr. Mehdi Majidi, and Mehdi is the founder and president of Libra Alliance, an educational and consulting service focused on sustainability, socioeconomic development. And Mehdi is also a founding member of the working group on the PRIME, Principles for Management, Responsible Management Education. Mehdi, are you ready? Mehdi?
Yeah, let me know if you hear me clearly.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you for inviting me on this discussion. So since the time is very short, this is mainly what I'm presenting here based on personal experience, living and working in Western societies, Asian societies, and also Middle East. Walking around, I noticed that with economic development and economic freedom, there are some set of mindset and behavior that is changing very clearly. And the more we look at it, the encouragement or direction toward individualism and freedom of individual has a connotation that we present interconnectivity as dependency. And that led me to look deeper to see the relationship between independency, interdependency, and dependency. And looking at these definitions that you have, we'll go to the next slide, please.
Yes.
Around the world, you see in mysticism, in all different teaching of ancient teaching, duality is really present in people's life. And that concept of duality at the core of it presents independence practice in understanding what's surrounding us and how to interact and how to be with others. From that perspective, I noticed I gave you some examples here that the teaching of one essential reality, symbolism, and representativeness. If you go to the next slide, in practice, a manifestation of focusing on non-duality, where in reality is non-duality, is duality within non-duality. Individualism moves us to more of duality, to the extent that the still in one survey, when we say on how satisfied, some US people in the survey answered more than 100% because life should exceed my expectation. When versus you get to Asian society, understand that perfect satisfaction leads to stagnation. So we lose that concept of good and bad. The degree of satisfaction is present in their life. Another example that I gave you is how we present our address. Does it start with me or does it start with the context? If the context doesn't exist, then I don't exist. So this relationship of existence with surrounding and behavior is important part. And I'm trying to bring this to leadership, consciousness, and teaching, what leaders can do in managing or creating the environment that it is interconnectivity works better in a holistic exchange of concept. My time is over, so hopefully we can elaborate more on discussion. Please see the link and the email for more if you want to interact directly. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Mehdi. Our next presenter is Richard. Richard is professor at the University of Dallas, and he has been a very active senior member of MSR, Management, Spirituality, and Religion Interest Group of the Academy of Management. Richard, are you ready?
I'm ready. Hello, folks. It's good to be with you today on this beautiful, beautiful day in Dallas, Texas. But here we are all over the world. And as we think about this and we talk about meditation, there are so many different forms. It seems to me almost with 7 billion people in the world that we have 7 billion ways of meditating. One that I have discovered just recently, but I'm told is quite old, and it descends from the current Dalai Lama. It's called Analytic Meditation. And as we think about this analytic meditation, and I'll go more into that later, but I want to give you a little preliminary. It would seem that in the current elements of what we're seeing in the business world, the dominant thrust, and especially so in the period from the 1970s to current, is that greed prevails. And if we recognize that greed prevails, and we look at the contrast with what greed has done to us with what it could be if we go into sustainability, we see movements into the sustainability area. Now, one of the key measures of sustainability is a reduction. And if you think about it, the reduction of 50% of our waste coming, or of our effluent coming out of the refining business in 20 years would still leave us with 50% of what they have at the present time. And if we think about what David Attenborough has presented in his beautiful work, starting with the Chernobyl experience and taking us to the needs to renew, to revise, and to grow, recycle, getting down to a sustainability area is absolutely essential to us as we recognize what is happening in the world and what we'd like to see happening for our children and our grandchildren. In order to do so, in looking at organizations, I think there are two changes that need to be. One is the organizational change, and the second is the change in the individual. And this, I believe, calls for a changed mindset. The changed mindset, I also recognize from one of my colleagues, Barbara Nussbaum, says that it calls for a changed heart. And in thinking of how we change our heart, it starts with our head. As I mentioned at the beginning, the idea of analytic meditation was presented to me with a thought that, is this what allows you, as you have meditated, to come up with something which says, here is the path to go? And I said, I'm not sure, but let me try the analytic meditation. And I did so. And as I was there, I was presented with an idea that said, here is a resolution to the problem that you have been facing. And I concentrated on that resolution. And at the time, I just emerged from the meditation with a shock. And I started writing. And I said, hey, this helps. This is it. And that has been a rare experience for me in most of the meditation I've done over the past many, many years. So I took this and I said, okay, what else can I do with it? And I tested it. Isabel has written a number of books, but the most recent one gave me an idea that I could use with my students. And I'll talk with you about that. I introduced analytic meditation in one of my classes, and it's assigned the Sustainability Inspector exercise from Isabel's new book.
Richard, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you share that information when we engaged in group discussion?
I'm sorry, Charlie.
Can you share that information when you talk about implication during the group discussion?
Yes, I can. I'll do that.
Thank you, Richard.
And that will be the result of that experience with the students. No problem.
Great.
So as we're looking at the changes that take place in sustainability, the key to me is that the meditation allows us to raise our conscious level. And the higher that it goes, as indicated by Dr. Nader in his talk yesterday, it tends to make the unconscious conscious. And this was something that I had not experienced so frequently. I was just doing the meditation and saying, all right, is this telling me that I'm on my right path? And it has worked for me for many, many years. As we think about this then, the idea.
Richard, I think we have other panelists to share their ideas, so you can continue to discuss about your ideas when we engage in group discussion. So
Okay.
Thank you, Richard. I'm sorry, but I have to move to other presenter to manage the time more effectively.
No problem. No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. And for our next presenter, Julia. Julia has earned her doctoral degree in management quite recently, I mean this year. And Julia is also a certified teacher of laughter yoga and mindfulness meditation. So I'm very glad because she and I co-wrote a paper. But anyhow, Julia, if you're ready, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to the panel, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about the project, an art campaign of the 12 sustainability mindset principles at the University of Kaiserslautern. And I will just very quickly share with you how this emerged and how the project will be held. So probably many of you who know Isabel know her book, The Big Bang Being. And I was teaching sustainability management for the last 6 years, for bachelors, for masters. And I'm always looking for new exercises, how to engage the students with a more experimental way of learning and with a more experimental way of thinking about their values and reflecting about their values at the first place. So Isabel introduced very funny boxes where she asks questions, and she also introduces in this book our Western worldviews, which prevent us from being sustainable. And those values are achievement, wealth, speed, knowledge, independence, comfort, control, economic growth. And I ask the students to pick one of the values and draw what comes to their mind. And Charlie, if you go to the next slide, all of you can see one of these amazing drawings that came out from there, which kind of shocked our professor, Katharina Spraul, and me, because it's just so beautiful. And all of you can go inside and feel what happens when you see the picture. And she reflected, her name is Susanna, she reflected that I find that wealth closes your eyes. The lilies are to represent the wealth because they are expensive and luxurious flowers. The blindfold shows that the woman, despite her wealth, is not able to see and is thus very limited or even keeps her eyes closed. My picture is to show that wealth does not always expand us, but may bring exactly the opposite. So this is what an 18-year-old girl wrote about wealth. And it is part of a course which is for first semester business students. And next to the course, I introduced those reflection questions, and one of them was to paint and write something about the painting, but the others are different questions. So the outcome is a kind of flourishing, which is a 1 year. I saw the pictures and contacted Isabel. Look what she did. I took your questions or similar questions from the book and asked the students, and look what she did. And we came up with the idea. I think it was Isabel who came up with the idea that we could do an exhibition with with drawings from her on the 12 sustainability mindset principles that Isabel showed before, like 10 minutes ago. So there will be an exhibition over 12 months where every month she paints a picture on one of the principles. And in parallel, there will be workshops and expert talks and community games on the topic of each sustainability mindset principle. And I was able to find many partners from our university which supported. And even though I left this university last week, the project will start in October, and the founding office will lead the project. So I'm very happy. And you will hear about it because it will be an online exhibition. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Julia. Again, you have extra time to delve into your topics more while we engage in group discussion. I feel guilty to interrupt you. I mean, every presenter is, but that's the job. Okay, next. Next presenter is Dr. Roland Bardi. Roland is the owner of Bardi Consult in Mannheim, Germany, and Roland lives on the both sides of the Atlantic in Mannheim, Germany, and Naples, Florida. And I guess that he's joining us from Mannheim, Germany this afternoon, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you. Here I am in Mannheim, very close to where Julia is. So it's from one of the youngest participants to the oldest, 78. Bardi Consult was my baby when I left BASF. I worked in business for many years, and then I took up teaching. My point here is from education to action. So when you want to integrate the facets of spirituality into executive education, which is my field now, I didn't really teach undergraduates just when I started my teaching at Goethe, but then it was mainly executives. So there would be 4 perspectives. Like when Isabel said, you have to connect data and mindset. So it's the wisdom-based, the transcendent, then the values guide, and the behaviorist perspectives. So if you go on, I will say when these 4 on the screen, wisdom, transcendence, values, behavior, I found out there's a good indigenous teaching or mindset building method, which is the medicine wheel. May I go on? I came across this medicine wheel when I was the member of a small German sustainability group by the name of ThinkCam. It's not there any longer. One very important visitor to this group was Alexander Laszlo. We all know his brother, Chris Laszlo. So I was happy to meet Alexander Group. So what's the medicine wheel? It's 4 corners: air, sun, water, earth. But then if you click the next, you will see you can go and add, Charlie, if you transcendency, values, behavior, and knowledge and wisdom to each of those 4 quadrants. And these 4, by the way, we practiced this lying on the ground, and we had 4 directions: right, left, bottom, feet, and head. And we were thinking of those 4 directions, spheres. So if you want to translate this into executive education, you have to see, well, knowledge and wisdom band, that is about why and where do you expect people to learn. That would be the accommodating response. Then if you talk about transcendency, you have to learn what to do and to learn of what not to do. So the reformative response. And then you have values. This is more or less the transformative response. What is your new values? Are your old values good? And that certainly goes and connects very quickly to behaviorist approach. So transformative, reformative, and accommodating as the 4 levels which you can, or 3 levels which you can connect to those 4 perspectives. Thank you. And now the question is, and will be in the discussion, Charlie, how do you connect this to conscious-based leadership and flourishing? I hope I made up time. Here I am. See you later in the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Roland. You're perfect. You're perfect in terms of keeping time. So our next presenter is Joanne. Joanne is currently pursuing a master degree in strategic management at Pace University. And she's also the co-owner of DGL Wear PCC, a slow fashion brand based in Greece.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm very happy to be here. So today I want to talk about the new generation conscious consumerism and how we can revolutionize fashion by acquiring the sustainability mindset. To achieve a more sustainable fashion industry with circular systems, we need fashion leaders that have the sustainability mindset, but also conscious consumers that hold companies accountable for their actions. The fashion industry is the 2nd leading cause of climate change. It plays a huge role in human trafficking and also employs a significant amount of the population due to its lengthy supply chain. These supply chains can be complicated and hard to trace, and that's why organizations such as Fashion Revolution have been fighting for more transparency. In 2013, you might have heard that the Rana Plaza building was collapsed in Bangladesh and more than 1,000 garment workers died. So then is when the dark side of the shiny fashion industry was exposed, but still things haven't really changed. The COVID-19 pandemic has deteriorated the financial situation of many fashion brands, leading them to canceling orders, not paying their employees, and leaving workers with no work, thus making them vulnerable to accepting jobs that are underpaid and dangerous. The pandemic has shown us very clearly that the production processes are not sustainable and makes the shift to more sustainable supply chains urgent. With empathy and the principles of the sustainability mindset, consumers will be able to make better decisions for themselves and for the world. As spirituality takes over the greed and the materialism, we will not only have a more sustainable fashion industry, but a more sustainable economic system. Us being consumers, we have a lot of purchasing power, and I believe we can make a positive change by rethinking our habits, starting internally with our mindset. The new generation conscious consumerism can stop the exploitation of a lot of workers. Conscious-based leadership can transform companies, cultures, and incorporate ethical management techniques through the sustainability lens. Companies now have to dig deep down and find the source of their products, understand the interconnections of environmental racism, human trafficking, and luxury brands, and so on. Aristotle introduced the notion that individuals always strive towards perfection. We have potential that is yet to be realized. And to realize our potential, he said that we need what's called real goods. By real goods, he meant those things necessary for the development of our potential, such as shelter and food. But in the modern world, there are certain things that we need to be able to do in the pursuit of fulfilling our individual potential. And in this sense, real goods are defined by their necessity to us as individuals. For example, money. But there's also what he referred to as the golden mean, not too little, not too much. Eudaimonia, what he called happiness, or else in Greek eudaimonia, exists in balance. And what really matters is just becoming the best version of ourselves that we can be. And one thing is for sure, we can all be more conscious consumers. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Perfect. Now, our last but not the least, the last presenter is Ashwani. Let me just show his slide. Okay, let me move to, yes. Ashwani is professor of environmental studies at Ramapo College in New Jersey, and his expertise is in the area of sustainability planning and regional environmental planning. So Ashwani, if you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. Hello, folks. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So I want to go back in time. I was about 12 years old when I first encountered an alternative to religion, and that was spirituality. We lived in a small hill town in India, and there was a significant Tibetan population there. And so I discovered first Tibetan Buddhism. After that, it went on to, my interest expanded into Zen Buddhism, Taoism, and other forms of a religious spirituality. So since then, I've been dancing around three ideas that have been central to my life. Spirituality, which encompasses a whole bunch of things that we've been talking about here. Systems thinking, which I think is the critical path forward, and sustainability. So these three ideas represent the cornerstones of my efforts over the past 60 years to understand exactly what's going on in the world and what proper action might mean. In that light, I want to shift the conversation towards the leadership idea and focus on that. There's much that I could say about the other aspects of it. Right? Today, I just want to focus on this one thing. What does enlightened leadership look like? And it comes down to three basic principles. You have to have decentralized, distributed leadership. That's number one. Number two, you have to have empathy and the ability to step into other people's shoes without a problem. And the third is an understanding of how systems work, complex systems particularly. So to summarize all of that into leadership management thinking, I present to you the traditional operating systems, hierarchical, rank hierarchical, CEO at the top, peons at the bottom. And the next slide, Charlie, adaptive operating systems, which are networks of individuals that are passionate about and familiar with specific issues, but come together in their relationships to talk about the meaning of action. Next slide, please. So this brings us to four forms of governance. Governance here being a proxy for leadership. It is structured around two variables, the desire to control implementation and the desire to define policy. If you take these two variables between tight and loose, so either you're driven to tight control of implementation or you're driven to a loose control of implementation. Either you're driven towards a tight control of policy or a loose control of policy. These four nodes give you four forms of leadership: tight control, tight policy definition, You want to be in control of what the organization does. You come to corporate decision making. Tight control, loose policy definition. You come to bureaucratic forms of leadership. Loose control, tight policy leads you to enterprise kinds of leadership. And loose control over implementation and loose policy definition leads you to a collegiate form of leadership. These four are not mutually exclusive. My argument is not these are four types, or rather my argument is that these are four types of leadership. The thing about typology, however, is that you can't take it as a proxy for reality. It's a way of organizing our thinking. It is not a way of, in fact, structuring action. So these four nodes give us the boundaries around which we're going to work to get at a distributed form of leadership. Next slide, please. And thank you. Back one. Thank you. So my argument here today is that we inhabit in any leadership system, we will inhabit all four of these sorts of leadership, types of leadership, in various degrees, overlapped and blended together. That, to me, is the concept of mindfulness, what in Hinduism is called dhyan, self-aware mindfulness, intelligence about yourself, intelligence about the world, the ability to put yourself in the moment and think more clearly about things. I'll stop at that.
Thank you, Ashwini. Great. Now, we will shift to the second phase of our presentation, and at this point, we will engage in a group discussion. We will focus on the scholarly, practical, and pedagogical implication for developing consciousness-based leadership and happiness from the four sub-themes. As you can see, I created 4 pairs of panelists. So each pair of panelists will have a sub-minute. So it is more like an in-depth, a little bit of an in-depth discussion about those practical or scholarly pedagogical implication from their mini presentation. Okay. So first, Isabel and Joanne, would you share your thoughts and reflection from your presentation on the scholarly and practical and pedagogical implication for developing or cultivating conscious-based leadership and happiness? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And if you allow me, Charlie, we were thinking with Joanna, she has such an interesting experience in the fashion industry and with youth. So I thought that maybe, Joanna, you could share, what do you think could be the impact of developing a new mindset, particularly in a globalized culture of consumption? Can you share a little bit?
Thank you, Isabel. That's a great question. I think that when someone has a sustainability mindset, their internal world, so their values and their beliefs, lead to their external world, so their actions and their worldview. So if I, as a consumer, believe in a fair world, and I'm actually faced with all the information regarding the negative effects of unsustainable products and companies in the society and the environment, I will make better decisions and change my habits. And that's what like theory of change suggests too. And because part of the sustainability mindset, as you have explained in a lot of your work, is understanding your role in leading the world to a sustainable path, this will become now your mission and responsibility to educate others. So suddenly, with a domino effect, we have conscious consumers all around the world, which then will pressure the companies to become more sustainable, and we end up having the next generation of conscious consumers.
So do you see that the entry is easier through younger people as consumers?
Absolutely, yes. That's what I'm trying to do to educate my peers first, and then hopefully it will, as I said before, create a domino effect. Yeah. Would you like to share more about your presentation as well?
I think maybe just to mention the last slide that we were not able to show, because these 12 principles actually are meant as footholds, little places where we can hang on to advance when we want to develop a mindset. So it's not linear. We can go in one direction or the other, like climbing a mountain. You start to find from where you are, depending the time of the day, how hot it is, or the weather, that you choose one or the other. But the idea is that these are little places, little pathways that help us achieve a mindset of sustainability. And in some context, maybe people are very environmental savvy and they don't need to understand more about what are the interconnectedness or eco-literacy, but they are not so good at connecting with mindfulness or with purpose. Or maybe someone is very creative, but just don't understand how this links to the environment, and where I'm an artist, how this connects. So I think we can use this in an organic way, depending where you are, what your audience is, and where they want to go. So that was the slide that was missing, little footholds. So back to you, Charlie.
Okay, among the panelists, do you have any questions or comments on Isabel or John's presentation? Okay, if
Roland has a question.
Okay. Roland, go ahead.
Unmuting. It's more or less a referral. Joanne was wonderful in showing what can we see in Bangladesh if there is no sustainable mindset, a sustainability mindset. And this reminds me of a wonderful presentation we had in Isabel's storytelling, the anti-phenomenal methodology. You have to show people what is the bad side, or as Joanne said, the real bads, and then they will know what the real goods are. So there is much better to go from that end to the other. This was my first click when I saw Joanne's first picture. Thank you.
Can I add to that? What Roland was quoting is a concept from a colleague in Finland, Jan Hermes, and he came up. He said he teaches in a business school, and he has been using the Brundtland definition of sustainable development. And now he said, I will innovate. I will do the anti-phenomenon, which is what Roland was saying. So instead of saying, well, what is sustainable development? He said, unsustainability is putting the poor last and acting in a way for my self-interest, something like that, in neglecting the impact that this may have on others, on future generations. And by stating it like that, that is so powerful. No one likes to be that, but yet we realize that we all are a little bit like that. So that is where he's getting a lot of engagement and reactions from his audience. That is the anti-phenomenon that Roland was saying.
Okay, great.
Charlie, may I add a comment?
Absolutely, Anil.
Yeah, I like this picture, and just I felt like you could convert it into, I don't know how you place these footholds, but it could be also inverted U, that you climb and you come out on the other side. So it's like you can play on the U theory and just have a step by step, and then go in terms of your whatever, and then come out more enabled, enlightened, powerful, action oriented, and so on and so forth. So that might be another way to sort of organize both sides of the mountains.
Great point.
So like reflection could be on the left side, purpose could be on the right side of this, inverted U kind of curve.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
May I share a personal experience on fashion industry?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mehdi, quick comment.
Yeah, fashion industry has been damaging for a long, long time. And I had a course on sustainable fashion management. It goes back to chicken and egg, what comes first. A lot of people that I met in this industry wanted to do good things and produce, sell differently, but the system does not allow. There isn't any system for them. So in one of my classes, I had people from fashion industry. They came up with business model. So the point I'm making here, we need to also think about existing business models that does not allow a conscious person to act. It is personal growth, inner growth, and system allowing you, or creating a system that allowing people to bring the change about. A business model of fashion industry is a big problem, not only people and mindset, is the business model.
Thank you, Mehdi. Very insightful comment. And I think this is a really right juncture to move into mindfulness. So Richard and Ashwani, if you have any comments from your perspective on analytic meditation or mindfulness, this is the time for you to share your insight with us. Please go ahead.
Richard, do you want to take it first?
I think, Ashwini, you can go first.
Okay, all right. So I think the one thing that I would want to expand on is this idea of dhyan from Hinduism, which in English translates into mindfulness, right? Putting your mind into the being of where you are at. In that light, leadership changes into something different. So you can lead from above, you can lead from below, you can lead from the middle out. All these things are true. But at the end of the day, if we accept all the principles that have been laid out by 7 speakers today, all of them put together would take us to this one place that had to do with mindfulness. I'll stop at that.
Okay. Richard, I believe you have a lot of things to share with us based on your how many years of teaching. So
Please go ahead. I think that there's so many things that are important in your leadership model, but the one thing that I look for in leadership is essential, and that is, do the followers accept this leader? And so much of this you can see expressed clearly in the servant leader, where the concept is, I believe, that those who are led become servant leaders themselves. And as we look at it too, the additional ideas of leadership are so important because so much of what we have been studying has been done from the external side of how to form the leader. And what is really needed, and what we're talking about, is the consciousness raising to develop the internal side of the leadership.
Makes sense to me. So I will, if I can elaborate on that for a few seconds. You're right. That is an important discussion in the context of leadership. But I would like to posit 2 versions of the purpose of this particular panel. One is, how do you take conventional leadership and move it to a sustainability mindset? That's one. The other is, how do you take the idea of leadership and embed it into mindfulness? So either the leadership is what you take as fixed, and then you try to move the properties of leadership towards sustainability, or you dismantle rank hierarchic leadership completely, replace it with distributed leadership, and then see what happens in terms of mindfulness and control. I wonder if that makes sense to you, Richard.
It does, very much so. I think perhaps what I can say further is that the sustainability mindset emphasizes a holistic understanding of conscious leadership. And however you decide is the leadership model for you to follow, you are still based on what we are seeing as a spirituality emphasis coming about more and more, arising out of the spiritual intelligence. It was in this sense that when I read Isabel's book and I asked the students to go into analytic meditation, they took to it very quickly, and I was quite surprised. The results, I very simply would put it, is that they found that their conclusions generally increased an awareness of the environment and an attempt to be as green and eco-friendly as possible. Further, the belief and practice, quote, that by reducing waste and recycling materials, one was able to gain efficient use while watching and reducing energy consumption, unquote. So that was just one student, but it was a common thread running through all that they had done. And this was a group of some 30 students.
Nicely put. Thank you.
Okay, Ashwani, I have just a quick question. Have you ever applied or brought your theory of leadership into your teaching in your classroom? Or what kinds of mindfulness practice actually you have practiced in your teaching in your classroom? I'm just curious if you have.
Sure. So by training, I'm a planner. I started off as an architect. I moved to international development. I moved to planning. And in that process became what I am today, which is a sustainability planner. That said, in my teaching and my pedagogy, the two ways in which I integrate these, one is that I make mindfulness, dhyan, an explicit part of my pedagogy, training my students to pay attention to context and purpose. And the second piece of it, I think that comes into play here, is not so much about meditation as about empathetic mindfulness, right? So to be able to put yourself in different people's perspectives, if you take complex system thinking seriously, then you have to come to a place where you have to be able to shift perspectives. The thing that makes complex systems different from simple systems is that there are multiple realities coexisting in the same place. What you see and I see are both real, but they may not be convergent. That's the piece that I try to give to my students.
Thank you, Ashwani. That's a very interesting understanding or interpretation of mindfulness, actually. Thank you. Now we will move to more of epistemological issues and concerns. So Mehdi and Roland, this is your time to share your insight or reflection on our key two concepts, conscious-based leadership or happiness. So please go ahead.
Well,
Roland?
yeah, Mehdi and I have known each other quite well, even so we didn't meet so often. We should have used this opportunity to do some preparation. We didn't. I think he was busy, I was busy. So taking up, if I may start from what Mehdi said about duality and non-duality. Non-duality, he said, is a mature state of consciousness. Or I would connect it to what was just said before. It's about empathy. It's about participative leadership, like we had the leadership models. And it's about taking the other into one's own sphere. And duality would just be the opposite. When I searched some minutes before about non-duality, I came up an interesting issue I wanted to share with you, which is that in the Filipino philosophy of work and leisure, and we are always talking about Westerners and Easterners, and the Filipinos, in my opinion, are like a mixture because they were so influenced by the Spaniards and by the US. And their non-dualistic worldview is what I was hearing is vertical. So they look up, meaning to your employees, and down, now up to your supervisors, down to your employees, in one way, opposed to the Westerners' world. Sorry, there was a ding.
No, it was not from me, Roland.
So. Well, so this is what I was contemplating when I heard and saw before what Mehdi is going to do. Just one word about this wonderful slide on the 4 types of leadership, where it was positively said that this is not types, this is ways of thinking. And I have been in a great corporation, a very large corporation, but it was really great because there was all types of leadership and they were all positive, because you need bureaucratic for building, let me say, a new organization. You need corporate, which with tight rules and tight policies to move this corporation, but you need loose policy implementation, loose control. If you are, what I was saying, in a tent outside, I worked in BASF Argentina. Argentina, I was thinking, is a country where you have Juan Domingo Perón, the great leader, so they expect you to be a leader. And if you don't lead like Juan Domingo Perón, you don't. No, it was all the other way around. They wanted, or they understood that empathy and participation moves. So this, I wanted to add to this wonderful idea that it's not for types, it's for ways of thinking, and they can all mix and be very fruitful. So that's me, Mehdi, I'm sorry.
No problem, no problem. On the concept of leadership and mindfulness, we are getting back to how ready your counterpart is to understand. What I'm trying to say here, we've been in education at different settings, and often while we are teaching, we recognize that an individual student in class grasps and understands better, or what I call it, they are ready for mindfulness or sustainability. It's two-way. And when the audience is not ready and the system is not there, you cannot do anything about it. In most of the old classic or ancient teaching, Socratism, our role as a leader or as an educator is first to be able to recognize that potential. If you are able to identify that potential that resides in individuals, then you can help them to develop and go toward inner growth. And then it comes back to the system that allows them to flourish and take action. So there is one, recognizing from the beginning the ability that we have to recognize that potential. Without that recognition, this leadership or this transfer of knowledge or guidance, I would say most of the time, I'm not here to teach you, I'm here to help you to find your way. It's your way, my experience. So your way should be different than me. And those have been the best relationship as an educator, as a leader in corporation, places that I work, I had, and we accomplished much better when my relationship is not hierarchical, is not transferring something that I know, is to create an environment and show them how to develop themselves. I don't want 10 students like me. I want 10 different students with different enlightenment, different lights in their bulb, so we can go in diversity of paths. Mindful will create a better environment. And that goes to the beginning that I said, dependency and interdependency, the way we teach. So I'm independent, at the same time understand the interdependency that I have to my students to create knowledge, and the interdependency they have, from my experience, to find their path. This dependency and interdependency is what fundamentally is the concept of non-duality in duality.
If I may add a few, because we wanted to talk about my methodology, or the methodology I presented, which is the medicine wheel. When Mehdi talks about students, it's young people. My present sort of attendees is mainly managers, and they have I would say they have a mindset that has developed for some time already. And if you take them into this spirituality issue, which is the topic of this seminar or this panel, they are very open, because like we had our 5 minutes of meditation in the beginning, this is something which takes them off the routine and all the building blocks which they have accumulated through their experience. And this is why I was, in my when I encountered this, I was very much in favor of doing this type, and it connects to knowledge, wisdom, data, to behavior, values, transcendency. It's all 4 directions, but there is always a center, which is yourself, which has to harmonize those 4, like water, sun, fire, and earth. It's to me, this spiritualistic approach is very helpful. I don't really know about educating undergraduates. I did this many years ago, but I didn't use this. I wanted to give them my knowledge. Perhaps it would have helped if not just I transfer knowledge, but also wisdom and attitudes and mindsets. But with managers, it's really helpful to have this type of methodology. Thank you.
I think that Roland and Mehdi's perspectives fit very nicely with the principles of transformative learning, actually.
Yes.
But I'd like to stop about here, and I will turn over to aesthetics and art-based practices. I believe that Julia has prepared some activity for the audience as well. So please, Julia, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Mehdi and Roland, for talking about the potential in the people that you teach. And I believe that all of you here in the room, which are 10 discussants and 83 people watching, have a lot of potential. And I want to share with you an exercise. And you just need any pencil you can find, just whatever is there. It can be any color. And I invite you to ponder upon flourishing, which is the topic of the conference, and see what emerges in you when you think of flourishing, and paint, draw it. I will give you 2 minutes for that. And after that, I will introduce you how we share very, very shortly. So you just go inside yourself, flourishing. What does flourishing mean to you? And you don't have to be an artist, just paint whatever comes to your mind. Okay. And for now, this should be enough. You can go on later with whatever you started. And now I have the question for you. What is one insight that you, if you now you look at the picture, what you draw, what is an insight that you can gain from this drawing? Is there anything? And please write your insight into the chat that we all share. And this can be a word, it can be what you painted, it can be what you learned while painting, but it can also be something that you learned about flourishing in these 2 minutes. So someone wrote, Natalia wrote, growth and flourishing go hand in hand. Okay, I will start again in 1 minute. Very nice. So people write, Isabel drew a flower and reflects that a single seed has the knowledge to develop petals, leaves, flower scent, new seeds, perfume, and color in the different parts. Flourishing is flowering, beautiful nature, it's love. Flourishing is sustainability and balance of actions. I saw a flower emerging from the soil, Jerry. There is only one energy field and it is pervasive. Sorry. I drew a family indicating power and unity. Circles help with holistic thinking. Nature teaches us how to flourish. We only need to know how to look. Heart beating stronger. Sunflowers. Strength is in weak ties. Flourishing is like an eternal spring of water. So imagine we had 3 minutes, and this is the power that drawing and painting and going on the inside and imagining pictures has. So there is so much wisdom and so much flourishing in and of itself only from drawing on flourishing. So maybe you the conference, like maybe Anil, you can copy what people wrote and put it somewhere, because I think it's really beautiful. Just 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for your very engaging and interesting project. As a moderator, I just add one thought. As a management professor, I always found a little bit shocked, because business students tend to believe that they are not artistic at all compared to those peers at arts and liberal sort of a college. So I try to actually debunk that stereotype, and I argue that environmental consciousness is basically a natural outgrowth of aesthetic consciousness. So a sense of beauty or aesthetic feelings should be cultivated even among business students. So I think that component of emotional education among business students should be also emphasized for the sake of mindfulness and for the sake of the sustainability mindset as well. At this point, I really appreciate the patience of the audience. So this is a time for stop sharing our slide. And audience, if you have any questions for the panelists, I just want you to type in the chat, and we all panelists will read and will respond to you for the remaining 15 minutes. So if you have any specific question to a specific panelist, I mean, you can name him or her and he or she can respond to your question.
Charlie, there is a question there directly to me. Can I speak on answering, or?
Not a problem. Go ahead, Mehdi.
Okay, there is a question here from Cynthia Cavalli asking about the 100% satisfaction that I mentioned leads to stagnation. This goes back to the concepts of duality and non-duality, that absolute goodness is a stagnation, because it doesn't have any room for changes, improvement, and absolute negative aspect is self-destructive. In many parts of the world, not the struggle between the two, because we are presenting good and bad as opposite forces. These are the forces that creates life and creates dynamics. Interaction actually helps both not only to survive, to make the environment better. In some cultures, they say life is made of action and interaction of opposite forces. What we have taught in the rest of the world, teaching these two forces as opposite. They are not opposite, they are complementary, but they have to interact and have opposite forces to interact. And so both can help the life to come along and improve the environment. That 100% satisfaction, most of the Asian, I say 75% is the maximum I can get. If I'm 100% satisfied, how do I know that I'm good? If there is no bad, I cannot understand that I'm bad. But in some part of the world, as I told you, some American answer was, it needs to be more than 100% because life should exceed my expectations. So that concept is the result of is overconsumption and never satisfaction, a lot of psychological problems that it never ends, and it doesn't get in interaction and improvement of holistic understanding. It's a short period for a long discussion. Cynthia, hope we can connect and talk more if you are interested.
Okay.
There is a question by Karkenis Ridaran. Roland, where was the source of the medicine wheel, or from which wisdom tradition? This is indigenous Native Americans. I can give you the source, but if you go into the Google and look at medicine wheel indigenous Native Americans, you will get a lot of sources. And while I'm talking, I used the time to direct one question to Richard Peregoy. Did you set organizational change and individual change as an opposite, or shouldn't they rather be synchronized? So meaning, if I change, I want to have my other interlocutors or my people, my employees change as well, and change the organization, synchronized.
Roland, yes, I look at this and I say that organizations change, but they are changed by people. So the biggest element of change has to come from the individual. And once we have seen that, it multiplies. It'll multiply upon success.
Yep.
Okay, I found very interesting and relevant question from Dr. Ray Gehani. He asked that, quote, we have been discussing collective consciousness, and yet in many families, husband and wife cannot agree with it 50% of the time and divorce in 5 years. So what do we need to do differently? Roland and Richard, do you have any wisdom based on your long years of marital relationship?
I didn't really catch the question because I was looking into the chat. Can you just quickly repeat?
Yes, I mean, this is the smallest sense of group, pair, husband and wife. We've been talking about collective consciousness, but the divorce rate is over 50%. So what's the problem and how we can manage this perennial issue?
Well, it's a good person you asked because I've been married for 50 years and more. And what I think, and I'm so displeased oftentimes when I see that a marriage breaks because people just want to live their own lives. If I have a compromise, which is marriage, I have to stick to rules. And I may be very conservative, but in Germany, we had a lady who was the head of the Lutheran Church, and she divorced. So I said to my wife, she should not have divorced. She should have endured. And my wife says, no, if the husband, blah, blah, blah. So we were not on the same level with this. But I think when in a family, there is, like we all said, empathy, common sense, mindfulness. Why should it not work? The smallest group can work very well, but one has to be unselfish. One has to give back, not just take. And I think that's, as the person who asked the question says, it's not very different from a small company. BASF, when I started in Ludwigshafen, had 50,000, now it's 38,000, but we had 53,000. And the question was always, how do you run a company with 50? And my answer was, it's not 53,000. It's small groups in the production facilities, in the marketing. And the main thing the big leadership has to do is to let them do their job and not interfere, and make sure that they harmonize with each other. So from the very 53,000 to the 2 people in a marriage is all the same. Harmonize.
Thank you, Roland. And I have Richard, go ahead.
If I may, I was given some advice when I married in 1956, and it was
even more.
and it was very simple. It said, remember 3 things: yes, dear, no, dear, and you are right, dear.
On that happy note, dear, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I have just a quick question to all the panelists. We've been talking about the quantum physics worldview, but I've been recently watching Color in Life made by BBC. It's basically about from an evolutionary worldview. And I found apparent conflict. From a quantum physics worldview, you and I are interrelated. But when we observe the natural world, surely there is a prayers and prey. So how can you reconcile this evolutionary biological perspective and quantum physics worldviews? I mean, that I'm struggling with that very intriguing sort of a question. So if you have any insight, or you can just email me after this session, but I just want to raise that issues, apparent conflict between physical and biological worldviews. People misuse Darwinian worldviews, but I will stop at this point.
Thank you. Thank you
And
all.
if there are many dimensions for that, I just was thinking there's the interplay of dominion and collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So thank you. So Charlie, now I have to ask you a question. What are the 2 takeaways from this session?
It was very exciting sort of a session, and I've been pondering upon the potentiality of that metaphor or poetic use of quantum worldviews or conscious-based leadership. It has a very huge heuristic value, and I will say that I learned from my panelists from diverse perspective or diverse approach to that poetic metaphors. That's my takeaway from this conference, if it makes sense.
A little bit. Anybody, if we can elaborate on that as to what? I think we talked about many things. Quantum sort of came towards the end, but overall, if you could say what was all these 4 conversations that you had, what do you think they led to?
If I may, the talk was spirituality. And we were talking about things which are in businesses right now, in marriages, about the goods, the bads and the goods, like when Joanna showed her pictures. So the interesting thing to me for that was everything can be viewed from this spiritual viewpoint, because it's not just numbers and figures, it's much more. And if you look at Isabel's 15 principles, they are everywhere, in any relation, in any business relation, private relation, political relation. And there is, for me, a nice takeaway from this wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Somebody build on Roland's thing. If I understood, it is this idea that you have this many aspects to it, and they can all be looked at from a holistic manner, spiritual, you can call it, or that there are many sides to it, and then be open and not get caught in one side. Is that something like what you're saying? Or somebody else? Let's have somebody else build on that. I mean, it's fine.
So there is, in planning, there's an article that was written by a couple of thinkers at Berkeley called Dilemmas in a General Theory of Planning. And they make in that article, which is back in the 70s, a distinction
quick,
between...
You need to be very quick, 30 seconds, if you don't mind.
Sure,
Just quickly
sure.
get to the point. What is the takeaway?
The takeaway is this: complex systems means multiple realities co-occurring without having to go into subjectivity.
Okay, so all the systems thinking, right? Certain
Yes,
complexities exist.
absolutely.
What does that mean to the manager? Behaviorally, thinking wise, training wise.
That is the question.
Well, system thinking for a manager, if I may, because I was in management, there is always more than one effect of your dealings, of your actions, and they have to be made understood. So if I take an action, I have to see that there are many repercussions and there are many intertwinements. And that is what you really have to show people, because normally in business life, it's all quick, quick, quick. Today, it's even quicker than at my time, but show the people what is the repercussion, what is the effect on several levels and on several directions. That's, for me, system thinking for a management world.
I can understand. So develop a holistic consciousness and not get, okay, so there are, because of unintended consequences, etc. One has to not externalize so many things and look at the holistic thing. Okay, second point, Charlie, we were talking a little bit about your one other concept of happiness. What was your takeaway regarding happiness? Remember the title was something about developing consciousness and happiness.
My takeaway is to go back to the Greek father, Aristotle, and study his words. That's my takeaway.
I mean, it's in front of the panel. And then you want to say your meaning, like what do you think the panel spoke about happiness, in what way? As a panel, did you get to some discussion on what happiness is or how you get it? Happiness and flourishing?
I think Joan only touched upon the notion of a flourishing from the fashion industry's perspective, but as panels, we haven't talked specifically about the ways to cultivate happiness among practitioners and the students as well. That's my understanding. I mean, other panelists will.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think it's
Please.
just trying to find your potential and understanding the tools that you need to get there. That's how you can reach happiness.
Okay. All right, so systems thinking and sustainable thinking leads to happiness, something like that. I was just reading the title of the thing, Developing Consciousness-Based Leadership and Happiness Using the Path of Sustainability Mindset. So that means that it would lead to it, right? That's the idea. Sustainable mindset leads to wholeness and happiness. All right, thank you very much. I would think that what you've discussed is also a lot connected to consciousness. There was a little bit of discussion on meditation. I think one of those two pairs, I think Roland, Mehdi, you were talking about, right? So there is that dimension. So development of consciousness is in many ways a holistic manner of developing sort of the sustainability mindset. But maybe each of the 4 pairs could just agree upon and just email out to me, and I can find ways to get out just one liner. Maybe you can't get one mindset, one takeaway. Maybe get 4 takeaways. Is that fair? At least 2 of you can pairs can send out, and we'll see if we can combine those 4 also into 2. Because what we are, this is a very intentional conference. We're trying to have clear takeaways out of the conference so that people walk away with certain key insights. So we appreciate everybody's wonderful participation. Thank you all very much, and see you in the, or let's see, we have to post the survey. Has anybody posted the survey? 1 second, please hold on. We'll just post the survey. All right. Give me a second.
I just did, Anil.
We did? Okay, good. For session number 7, right?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, we can just post it. So please, everybody take a moment to click and give us your feedback. This will help us understand and get back to the panelists, get back to everybody. So what we did right, what we can improve upon. Getting more blissful next time around. Everybody see that link? SurveyMonkey/ICCLM07. All right, thank you. Then, yeah, please make sure you just get a chance to click, and then you can fill out even after the session is over. Thank you. The next session will begin in about 90 minutes, and we'll see you. That is on transcendence. That's a keynote session on transcendence, transcendental approaches to oneness and flourishing. Thank you very much. Take care.